Hello, this is Patrick from Ground to Dust, and I thought I'd make a video about something that somebody asked about recently. That is file versioning, and I expanded that topic into also just collaboration in general. And something I had wondered about previously is how artists that are multiple people go about collaborating on music and projects when they are not in the same space and they don't necessarily have access to the same gear, and how does the file trading and all that sort of work. And I don't know that I've ever really seen it explained or covered anywhere, so I thought I would go over how we do it. This may not be the best way, but it is sort of um, where we find ourselves now, a few albums in working together, and the sort of patterns and habits that have emerged. And some of these could be applied to just, working solo. They don't have to be in collaborative projects. So for starters, file versioning. When we start a file, we will just call it whatever. We will give it some working title. That can actually be something relative to how it was made, or what you're going for, or themes or ideas you have for the project. But a habit I got into years ago with just the sheer amount of ideas and clips and sketches I would start was I would just throw a date on it. So we have here the project folder for Awaken to the Sun, and the earliest version was just called 10/17/22A. That means on October 17th of last year, I started this project. And the A means it was probably the first of a couple projects I started that day. I probably threw in, half an hour's worth of time and then went on to 10/17/22B, etc. So that is just a working title, says nothing about what it is, but the unique character of the song has not yet presented itself, so I don't want to give it a real name just yet. Then first thing I do when I open it up the next time around to add more to it, I save it as version 2 before I change any notes. And so on and so forth from there. Strictly speaking, you do not need to make every change a new version. You could spend 3 hours working on a song one day and maybe make that like 2 or 3 separate versions if you're, say, at different crossroads in the creation of the track and want to save a state to go back to in case you totally change your mind. Something you're trying is maybe not a good idea and you want to go back to it later. Similarly, if you're only putting in 10 minutes of work a day for 3 days, that may only count as a single version because you're still filling out one singular idea and you don't see a need to keep that as multiple different files. We have here then, version 1, essentially, version 2, version 3. And then the next one I have is Awaken to the Sun version 4.1. Now, one thing to note is the song now has a title. Somewhere between version 3 and version 4, we gave it a name. Additionally, this is missing version 4.0. So what likely happened here is that I sent version 3 off to David, he made version 4, and then when he sent it to me, I saved it as version 4.1 on my end to be my new file going forward. A 0.1 version increase can represent a few different things. It might be fixing some plugin or wave file issues that, a previous version and this version don't align and I need to swap in a different plugin or audio file. It could be a slight tweak to some element within the song, including plugins or effects. It's generally not new content, new writing, new arrangement. It's more just fixes and changes and tweaks. And then we have here 4.3b. Now, an A, B, or C typically refers strictly to mix. That I haven't changed anything, I'm just adjusting some of the levels, some of the settings for mix purposes. So you might be wondering, what happens when uh, you guys don't operate in sync with one another? What happens when one of you does some work on a project and someone else does some work on a project, and now you have two different files going on? Well, I'm glad I asked myself that. So here's a remix we're working on. I had received files for this the other day and done some work on it, and David then did some more work on his end and uploaded new files. So his changes don't really include my changes. So I have two different files that I now need to essentially marry together into a singular file that includes, ideally, all his changes and all my changes. So first thing I will do is I will save this as a new file. Then I will go to where his new version is, and I'm pulling in the entire track. So most of these will be duplications of layers. Okay, so there's everything all together. His whole version, my whole version. Let's clear out some extra junk. You can always put it in later. He has layers he's not using, so I'll take those out. Okay. So let's look. We've got a pad here. So I take the two layers that are the same, and I will look at the two layers together and see what, if anything, has changed. And so it looks like from his version to my, well, from the original to the changes I made, and then the changes he made, he didn't really change anything. So he didn't touch that. Mine is the more recent. So I will keep mine and get rid of his, because mine includes all of his and then some extra stuff. And then do the same with the next layer. Now, one thing to keep in mind about my changes is that I added time. I added about 8 bars. So everything of his is going to, even if I keep his instead of mine, will need to be shifted about 8 bars down. So let's do that. I will keep his drums after they've been shifted to match that 8 bars I inserted. Glitch Fox. So I added some automation in addition to the 8 bar shift. I added some automation. I will probably keep mine because of the automated elements, but I also may reshuffle them to match his changes. So for now, I will mute his, keep mine, and then sort of see what needs to happen with those. Then, so here we have some distorted beat, and once we calculate the 8 bar shift, and again, yeah, he shifted things in the later half a bit. Not sure what he did there. but we'll keep his, get rid of mine because there's something else going on there, and I'm not sure what, but I will want to likely keep it. Well, another reason I might go through this whole process, even if it isn't this sort of, combining two different versions, uh, that have walked off in different directions, is because when we exchange project files like this, we are including all audio. But if we're trading back and forth a few times, it's audio the person already has, but we're still copying it into the project file and sending it again and again. So the existing audio files are getting multiplied time and time again, and that can get to be a lot of unnecessary space being taken off by, trading an entire vocal track back and forth multiple times for the same song. So if I keep my existing audio track with the existing audio file, as long as it matches the version in his file, I can throw his out because his is using a different new copied audio file, and I don't really want to be duplicating that file space unnecessarily. So I will throw out unaltered tracks to minimize how much new files I need to store. But like this distorted bubbles layer, that is entirely new to this iteration. So that I copied those files over and in. For every project we work on, we create a folder in Google Drive. The bulk of the folder will be the latest MP3 file for the song. That way, at any given time, we can go into the folder and listen to the full stereo mix of the song as it exists at that time. So what this means is if I work on a track all day, I may not be ready to send any audio files or project files or anything over because I'm still working on it, but I should at least try to upload a mix down to the folder. Because this album is done, we no longer need to hold on to the project files in the folder, so they're gone. But there would be a folder here called project files, and so when it is time to turn in a version, say, okay, I've done all I'm going to do with it for now, we'll upload the project files to a folder so that if the other person decides to take a stab at it in the meantime, they can go get download and carry on. We will also have a document like this. So this is our notes file for the Shift album. We have a list of all the tracks we're working on for the album. We've got the project name, so what it was called when we started working on it. As we went along, we put in the track titles. That way, depending on, any file we might have or lay our hands on, we can connect it to the track, whether that be the old working title or the official title once we start to call it something. We keep track of the current version so that if, you listen to whatever MP3 you have downloaded and you like it or hear something to change, but you aren't sure if it's the latest version, you can check against it, or you can make sure you're grabbing the right project file, because, the older versions will sort of hang out in the folder for a while before we clean it up. Then we'll keep track of who the song is currently checked out to. So you know, David had Scalpel for a chunk of time doing all his cool stuff on it, and so that was marked off to him. And so I knew to not really focus any attention on that because you don't really want to be working in two separate directions at the same time. We also put in some theme suggestions to give a sense of narrative feel to the track. Not every piece of music needs to be about something or have a story to tell per se, but I think any piece of art should have a sense of feeling to it to sort of say what it is and what it's about, even just in an emotional sense. So while most of our pieces were just sound experimentation and excursions with no real intent behind them, they did each have sort of a unique feeling to them that informed things such as their title or helped create new ideas for where the song can go. And then when a narrative arc to the album started to come out, then helped with, putting those tracks in an order that helps tell that story. Then we had sections for each of us for notes, and there's not many notes left because the album's done and we did most of what we were looking to do, and so you add and remove notes over time. Also in here we did brainstorm album titles and concepts and ideas and the narrative arc for the album. The first sort of pitch for the album when we were writing it did talk about being very synthetic, but even some organic things in there. We wanted to actually make sound very alien as well. And that a real driving beat to it was not a priority. It was cool to have, but that wasn't really what it was about. It's more about creating interesting and active, artificial but alive spaces. And then as we went along, we put together a more focused narrative for the storytelling of the album, which really isn't reflected in any real tangible way. So like if you're not picking up on it or not seeing it or hearing it, that's fine. It doesn't really matter, but it does sort of give us a not a roadmap, but a stars to follow when putting the whole thing together, including artwork and titles and song order, etc. And then finally, we have a mix notes document that comes into play later on. And as we are two people writing the music and producing it together, but one person doing the mixing and mastering, I wanted to have David's input on the mixes. So as the mixes went up into the folder, he could listen to them, give his feedback on the mixes. I'd put my feedback in. I find it a good idea to take notes on mix and design and writing and everything when not actually having the DAW open in front of you. Like there's your mind approaches things differently when there's a distance between you and the thing you want to fix or change versus when it's right there and at hand. And so I like to listen to mixes removed from actually doing anything about it and highlight what is actually standing out as like this needs to be different. So again, there aren't really any notes left at this point because we'd gone through and made all the changes and tweaks and everything. But again, the versioning is still there. That it is, you know, X number mix, X number master, and then the even in there. So Awaken to the Sun, because version 4.3 was the final sort of production version of the track before mixing. That remains constant. And then there's the mix number and then the master number. And so it is always keeping previous versions so you can go back if you need to, and so you can tell which is the latest and most recent. So that's all I have to say at this point about collaboration and file versioning and file naming and how to work together with somebody on a creative effort. If you have any questions or ideas for other things you'd be interested in hearing me talk about, please let me know. All right. Bye.